Why are they printed right there where you have to copy them into
that's something I have like a configuration on. The voice would auto-populate it, but I don't think you can do that with the API.
Okay. So it should work. Yeah. Let me make sure I'm on the conference speaker. Yes.
Cool. You can also stop the video if you'd like to use it.
Okay.
Cool. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Cool. So we're live. Hello, class. I have to do attendance first. Watch this. Dakir, Ava. Wait. Who's sitting here?
Okay. Oh.
You're not supposed to. Oh, wait. Caitlin, Kelly, Kate, Elizabeth, Tim, Dana, Alice, Jaquay, Pamela, and Jesse, and Will. Took a little bit. I can remember that many people. There were 30 of you. Maybe not.
I don't know, that was pretty good.
If you ever want to pull this up, like feel free, just like arrange this however you want. And go for it. Just put your hands up back.
I think I'm just going to put the slides up on here.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever you want to do, like go for it.
Okay. Share screen. Share. Okay. Anna, you were sitting there. Yes. And we have all 11 people. 11 people. Everyone's here. All right. Okay. So, we're back to boot camp. Sorry, folks, but we're going to do a bunch of new stuff, and it's even more new stuff. We're going to learn another language a little bit this week. It's really the only language left, pretty much, and it's not a big deal, like, to learn it or not. The language is called SQL, and we'll get into that a little bit. Don't worry about it. You don't really need to know it in order to be a programmer. You can if you want. Some people specialize in just data, just databases. But it's good to be familiar with it, because what you're going to be building, if you have a website, a web server, anything that's going to be storing data and you're connecting different clients to that data, it's going to use something like a database, and it's going to have all of this running underneath it. So we're going to just go through some fundamentals of what that means and what it's for. Today. Tomorrow, we could do OpenHack, and I'm planning the activity tomorrow will be actually starting to take some of the principles of just modeling data. So we'll be doing it on like pencil and paper or with a drawing tool that I'll show you. Basically for the activity, it would be great if everybody who has some data in their capstone can actually try to do a model in the way that we're going to learn how to do that. So that is something we might be able to take to OpenHack tomorrow, because there'd be a lot of people there who might want to help. Or if you'd like to have the focus of the room and just do it here, we can do the same thing here. So I think I'll just leave that up to like a vote. Or does that sound good? All right. Okay. So let's get into it. All right. So we're going to talk about databases. We're going to talk about modeling data. And we're going to talk about eventually later on what's called an object relational mapper. So that's like basically something that takes data from a database and maps it to code, things in code, JavaScript objects, whatever kind of object. And it sort of removes a whole lot of the complexity of thinking about all this stuff. Except when you need to, in which case you got to know all this stuff, or usually better yet, work with somebody who knows a lot about this, and then you go to them. They're usually called a DBA, database administrator. You say, I need this to run faster, and then they figure it out. But you could do that yourself if you want a career as a database person and just work with databases all the time. there's plenty of work doing just this because it can get really interesting. Okay, so we're going to start today. I got the code from Max's app last week, and I figured like it would be good to sort of try to get a little continuity today. And let's base what we're talking about today off of the chat app. And let's go back and take a look at that real quick. So I suppose I should pause here and say, is everyone dying to use Glitch or one of these other environments, or is it okay if we go back to just checking out the sandbox from GitHub? Is everyone okay with doing that? Because if you with Glitch, okay.
I have to fix my GitHub.
Well, let's get that out of the way then. So can everybody go to the Careers in Code sandbox? I'm going to need to make this much bigger. Can everyone go to the Careers in Code sandbox project that we've had? And the weird fork. And I'm going to say pull. Okay, so I've pushed up some changes today, and they are in my folder. And I just copied the two files from the chat room app from last week into here. And I'll be, we'll just take a look at them here. We're not going to.
So you're inside of GitHub?
I'm inside, so I've opened the Careers in Code sandbox folder.
You're in VS Code.
Yes, I'm in VS Code, and I have, let's see.
Because I'm actually on GitHub looking at the different module folders.
Yeah.
So you would prefer for us to be VS Code. I missed a couple things.
So
Okay.
sure, it's called Careers in Code Sandbox, and I think everybody saved it several weeks back. If you still have it locally, is anyone else? Does everyone have it? A copy of it?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Does anyone not have a copy of it?
It's the one where you have like all the folders with all of our names.
Yeah, the folders are all our names, and I've made a new folder. I have a cost folder here, and I've made a new folder called Chat Room App, and this is just a copy of most of the code from Max's demo last week. So it looks like you opened your own folder as the whole project folder. So can you just do like file do like open workspace maybe, and then go try that drop down. You want to pick the whole constraint. And why can't okay maybe. Okay. So maybe close out of this and try that. Maybe, yeah.
So there's a conflict.
Okay.
Tell me to commit.
I'll come back to
Okay. Okay.
Get rid of what? Oh, you do have one already. In that case, you need something. That's okay. We can fix that. So, go to file and open. Oh, no, that's right. Okay. Oh, yeah, perfect.
Where do we find this in there?
So there you go. Time built into the other one back up to GitHub because you don't want to mess that up. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I mean, I think
Not that one. It's probably on yours.
okay, we want to start with that. Okay. Yeah. Maybe try to do it. Yeah, yeah.
Converse.
The server, yeah, mine, and then. Oh, okay, he has chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, like so the actual like video, so you stop video and then the video goes, so just for a more screen real estate. So basically like you were capturing the webcam just a second ago.
So the little square.
Yeah. Do you want that?
I don't care.
Okay, it's up to you.
Yeah.
You can watch screen real estate. So
Okay.
it's very
Cool.
little, but it's
Got
up
it.
to you.
Thank
Turn
you.
it back on.
So you can do both at the same time. Very nice.
Perfect.
What's the conflict?
I just deleted this file.
Oh boy, deleted by them. So one thing you can always do is just remove this whole folder and restart it, but maybe it's good to struggle with this a bit. Okay, so go scroll down.
I deleted it, and this is now where it's at.
Unfinished merge. Oh boy. Okay.
And if you go back.
So the thing is, you might have. This is a new file. Like this is all in the same branch. I would wimp out right here and just download the whole thing again.
Okay.
Because I do that all the time. Now Ryan he's watching, he's probably like, no, don't do that. Try to but I don't know, like it's yeah.
What is there to merge? Because it's.
Well, so
I'm on the master.
somehow you have added or staged like every file in the whole repository, and that seems a little scary because
Okay.
that I don't know what that change is actually going to do. So just do. I would. Here's what I do a lot. I do is I have cd dot. Okay. Space dot. Sorry. So you're going to go up to a different directory here, and then do ls. ls. Now do rm dash. No, space dash rf. Be very careful what you do from this point because this will delete any file on your computer that you want to. So do space, CAR, tab. Okay, now hit enter. And it will remove the whole folder. So then can you go to, no, so then do git clone space and do https colon / github.com / hackupstate, I think it's all one word, / careers -in -code -sandbox. No, not slash. Okay, try that. Okay, now do cd. So careers and code. Tab. All right, so you got a fresh copy. And now if you look at here, you might have to reopen this whole. You might have to reopen this whole code window.
Okay.
So, yeah, you're already. Well, no, there it is. Okay. So what happens if you go to the GitHub now and try to do like?
Oh.
Try to do like git pull, git push.
So you do that from a clone set, since you already cloned it. Just git pull.
Whichever you want. You can have it look at the fetch the latest automatically. Okay, try git push. Okay, so I think you're all set.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody still needs help with this? Maybe you did.
Well, but now it's the same that yeah, and when I go to like.
I guess we should, I don't know which branch.
Which one?
Okay, so this, I just figure out to do this. This is sort of the escape hatch, you can reset it. So, okay. So clear, sorry. So you have a there until you answer, sorry, that's your current range. And then that start means you have a change that you can do it. Just. Well, so those changes are over here.
Yeah.
That's wow. Okay. But how does it?
Oh,
It is very helpful. So, sorry. Fix that. So just do. Give RM. Yeah. Yes. Yep. We fixed that, but just do a. Yeah. Get snatch. Get snatch. So CD space. Just talking about RM. Dash RM. Very careful. Space. CAR. This is getting full fresh thing. And then space. You get that web address from the GitHub.
I hope she doesn't text me. When she did, I was able to. I want to know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We all have the repo up. And
Dana, you got the repo?
All set.
Okay, all good? Cool. Okay. So we are going to just take a little review over what this program is doing. Now it's in GitHub. What I'm going to do is when I make some changes, if you remember from before, I will commit them to Git. And then if you go to this Git tab, which is this strange fork here, there's the 3 dots, and you can do pull, and that should get the latest that I've pushed up. So you feel free to follow along in your own folders if you'd like to type it out as well. There's not going to be a whole lot of code these first few days, but I just wanted to use this as an example, and we'll get everybody on GitHub because then we'll be adding to it later this week and next week. Okay. So
So do you want us to copy the folder, that folder into a folders?
you can copy this file, everything inside my folder called chat room app. You could just copy that whole folder into your folder if you'd like to start working off of the same place. I wouldn't worry about it today because we're not going to be typing a whole lot, and this will be, I'll check in this that's updated, and we'll make sure everybody has the latest, and then you should be able to copy it from there anytime you want. Okay, so we're going to review this app and talk about why it needs a database. So what's going on in this application? Here's just a very quick review. If you go to this endpoint, this /send here, and you do a put request, you learn about HTTP put requests. This server is going to accept the request that you sent it. It's going to actually expect there to be a body on that request, which has 2 things. It has a name and a message. So it's a person sending the chat message and then the text of the message itself. You're going to put both of those into the body, send it here, and this here is going to take an object, or sorry, an array that is just sitting somewhere here. Messages is just this empty array here, which just runs in the context of this page. It's just any old JavaScript array, but it just sort of sits there forever, and no matter how many requests you make, it's going to be pushing into this array every time you make this kind of request. So messages should become updated as an array with all of these things, and each one will have the name that it's read out of the body, the message that's read out of the body, and a timestamp which is generated at the time you send the message. So then it logs it just for debugging, and it returns an OK message to the client. So this is how you send a message, and this is how you cause this server to store that message somewhere. Where it's storing it is just a JavaScript object which runs somewhere in wherever the program is running. It's got an object too, along with the rest of the server stuff that program is responsible for.
Sorry, Gus.
Yes.
Where are you right now? 'Cause my code I'm looking. You're in. Oh wait a minute. No, never mind.
I'm in the server.js file. There's really only two files that are relevant.
Of course, I put them all on.
So this is what renders the text box and the buttons that let you actually talk to the server. And I haven't really looked at this one at all, but it uses fetch to actually make the requests to the server. I'm probably not. I think we're gonna not actually use this piece because it's really cool. You've seen the potential of it last week, but I think it's just going to be too many things to say. We're going to have a web page over here and this and that. So for the client, we'll be using curl, or everyone has tried Postman. I heard it didn't work that well for some people. There's an alternative called Insomnia, which I use, and either one of those is fine. We'll be using just something like this to directly make requests, send data, receive data. We don't really need to think about the UI part right now, because I think it'll just complicate things. But that's all on this index page. It's drawing the form and the text box and the buttons, and it's making fetch requests all together in the one page. The server has these two important endpoints. The first one is, again, to save a message, to send a message. And then the second one is to print out all of the messages that the server has. So when you send a GET request to this place /receive, it's going to send you back an object. It'll take this and put it right into the response. And this object will have one key called messages. And what that will contain is just the entire array, the same array that's up here, and the same array that you're saving your messages into. So it's all just an array right here, and you can add to it and you can display it, and that's all you can do. So let's just quickly do that, just so that everybody has a nice kind of reference to what I'm actually talking about here. So if we say receive, it's probably, it's running. So let's go back for a second. Just so if anyone wants to get this running, when you do node, you do node install, npm install, you're going to be adding all these packages that the server's going to use. I'm going to pretend like I didn't already do that, so I'm going to actually remove the node modules folder. Nope. Why don't I see a node modules? Ah. Well, anyway, I don't know what happened, where my node modules are or whatever, but to get this to work, at some point in Node, your Node environment is somewhere, and you are requiring at different points in this program these different packages. You know about importing, requiring this one called Express, there's one called body parser, there's one called moment, and there's one called FS. I don't know if all of these are being used, but let's just be sure to install all of these. So we're going to do npm install, and you can do -- save this time so that we get a nice package saved with all of these. And we can not have to remember which every single one of them is in the future. So we'll say express body parser. The third one is moment. And the fourth one is FS. Okay, so it tells you here it's plus symbol and it's added each of these packages at a certain version. Very good. Now, okay. You know, I think I have to run npm init to get it to actually do any of that setup. So I'm just going to hit enter for everything default here, and then run the last command again. So I hit up on the terminal in order to get the last command and run it again.
Which one? Oh, the install.
Yeah. So I ran npm init and I picked all the defaults and then installed again. And this time it's created a package.json file. When I did the init, it's created this package lock, and the dependencies here are all listed. The ones that I've asked it to install, they're all placed in this file. And then if I just do npm install at any time in the future, I don't have to remember or list out what all the packages are because they're saved in that file. And this is how you'd send somebody a repository that doesn't have all the dependencies ready to go, but it has that one file so that they don't have to go search for all the dependencies. They can just run npm install. So it didn't do anything this time because it's already installed them. Now I'm going to check this in, and you might have fun if you did this locally and you try to pull my changes, because they'll probably be just about the same, but not necessarily. Added npm project to chat room app. Okay, I'll push that up. Oh, I have to run pull first. Now push. Okay. So now that all the dependencies are installed from the same place, and I've just realized probably most people are using the terminal inside VS Code. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to switch to the terminal in VS Code, which is right here. And it shouldn't matter that I installed it from a different terminal because I'm in the same folder here. So if I do cd gustcost / chat room app, I'm in the same folder that I was in, right here. And now if I do node server.js, that's going to run this file through the Node JavaScript interpreter. And this is going to run a web server, and this will serve. It says server is running. Now, it doesn't tell you where it's running, but if I look down here, this is starting up the server, and we're binding it to any IP address, which is what all zeros means there. And we've got 8081 as the first argument. So that means it's on port 8081. Did you go over ports with Ryan? Or okay, cool. Okay, so this means we can go to localhost 8081. Any of you, if you have my IP address that's on the local network, you could go to my IP address, :8081, and you'd be able to see this same server. For development, we're usually going to run servers on the same machine because it's like, you know, you want to have control. You want to be able to set it up and tear it down and experiment with it, and then connect to that from your web page, and you can have it all together if you're developing both. So you'll do a lot of localhost, which is a way to look at my own computer, port 8081. Now, if I send the GET request to this receive endpoint, I'm going to get back an empty array of messages. Does all of this make sense so far? Okay. The messages haven't been touched because I just started the server. It just made that empty array, and it's going to return it in this response. I'm not sure what I just did there, but I hope it didn't break the stream. Now we do send, and if we send this request, it's going to say 404 not found, which either means we're using the wrong method. It's got to be a put. Or I have the wrong address, or both. But I think it is, oh, save. No, not save, send. Save is for saving to disk. That's not even. Okay, so if I do put to send, this doesn't really validate very well. I can sort of put anything I want and it'll try to figure it out, but I'm going to be a good client here. What?
Linda, yeah, she posted in Slack.
Okay.
Changing in the app.
Change what in the app? Is it is she talking about the client? Maybe this, yeah. So this is for the front end. Like this looks like this was Max's server. Okay.
No, it says in the HTML file, yep.
Okay.
That was our glitch thing.
Okay, so if we wanted to use this locally, we'd have to put the same address in here. So this will be localhost. Thank you, Linda. And this is a strange name for a server. And I'll check in this change as well, just in case if you want to use the local server with the actual interface.
So do you have to change that?
Anywhere where it says plausible dash scallion. And I'm going to check in this change right now.
Okay.
Pull and push. Okay, so if everybody does a git pull from this menu here, you should be able to get the latest. Hopefully your package.json is not going to conflict. But if you see merge conflict in package.json, let me know. Okay. I wonder if we should make sure everybody is set up with their favorite way to make web requests. How many people are using fetch and they prefer that? Is their favorite? Okay, what about terminal and curl? Nobody likes that. Okay, what about something like Postman or Insomnia?
We
I like
didn't do
fetch.
insomnia.
You like Fetch? Okay,
Fetch kind of guy.
cool. Well, so you should be able to do it with Fetch. What we can do here is, sorry, I need to just close this terminal so I don't keep going back to this other terminal. VS Code has the terminal. Get this out of the way. Okay. So how do you open a second terminal in VS Code? Does anyone know?
Yeah, right here.
The plus?
No, next to
Oh,
the
there's like a
plus.
split window.
Yeah, the split window.
Oh, cool. Okay, so we're going to put the server on the left here, and we'll make a fetch client on the right. So if I just run node, and if I run fetch, fetch is not defined. What if I do require var fetch equals require fetch? Module not found. Okay. Quit is not found.
So when I just tried to pull, I got, please clean your repository working tree before checkout. I don't think
Okay.
it sounds a
Yeah.
little. If you ask me.
Let me take a look here. Okay. So that means I think cancel, because I've changed these same exact files.
Right.
You probably want to just discard those and then download the ones that I did, because otherwise you're going to have to merge them yourself. Now, if you put
How?
these files in your folder, in your A to C folder,
Yeah.
then they shouldn't have a problem because they're different files.
Okay. So
But
what's
for
the easiest?
right now, the easiest way is go to the menu at the top.
Yeah.
Sorry, the one you're on, the three dots,
Yeah.
and then do discard all changes. And that should say, discard 3 files. And then if you do pull again, that should
Okay.
should get you the latest. Okay. So we're gonna do npm in our same folder. We're gonna try a client here. We're gonna run npm install fetch.
So do we need to install this up on our own, in our own project, even though you're putting it into the main folder that we're pulling? Like the
Yes,
fetch and,
so-
I mean, the
so-
install and.
So at the end of class today, if you want the base this to
Okay,
base
so
off
we don't
of,
need to do it now.
I wouldn't do it
Okay.
now. What I would do
Gotcha.
is copy what we have at the end of class,
Gotcha.
including the package JSON that we have,
Okay,
because that'll have all the dependencies, and then all you're going to do is run npm install
okay,
in your folder. You've got to go into
Gotcha.
your folder and do that, and then
Okay.
you'll be able to run it.
okay.
Okay. So I'm going to do npm install -- save fetch, just to make sure it's all part of that same file, and you'll get all the dependencies you need just by running npm install. And see, it's added fetch to our dependencies here.
Oh,
So now if I do node and I do var fetch equals require fetch, I'm able to do fetch right here because I've just installed it and I'm running it locally. Now if I do fetch, I got to remember how to use fetch. It's going to be HTTP localhost 8081/receive. And this one's a GET request, so I don't think you have to do anything special with it. Fetch is not a function. We're going to look that up real quick. So we go to npmjs.com, type in the name, and you can usually find the documentation just by going here. Apparently you have to do fetch.fetchURL. When did that happen?
What?
Nobody's heard of this,
No,
right?
that's wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, I'm going to make a client file that does this, but when you're in a browser, you don't do any of this. You just do fetch, and it's a function. You remember this, right? This is what. So it's different when you're not in a browser.
I did always think fetch was a function.
It is in a browser. Apparently, it's different in Node, but it still exists in Node, and it's still called fetch, even though it's a different thing.
So it's like a
Which,
thing you have to download.
Yeah. Now, all of this will be in the, like, you don't have to track everything I'm typing, because all of this will be in a client file that I'm going to make. So we do node, and we do var fetch. We're just going to name our thing fetch, because this is stupid. This is incredibly inconsistent. And now if we do fetch,
We were using node mod last
receive.
week. Does that make a difference?
What?
We were using node mod last week. So how does that fit into what you're doing? I mean, it just watches things.
So I think that runs, yeah, it runs your server and it restarts it or something when you change it, I believe. So this doesn't even work with promises. Okay. I think we should, for the client, we shouldn't get fancy because we're not even supposed to be learning about web clients. I think everyone should use Insomnia or Postman. So if you can't get Postman working, who was it that wasn't able to get Postman working? I heard somebody, it was broken. Is this correct?
That was you, Dan, right? But you worked it out.
Yeah.
It works?
It
Okay.
was broke for a while for me as well.
Working. Everyone has Postman. We're going to use Postman because it's easier than learning about node inconsistency while I'm trying to do it. Okay. Okay, so I'm making a collection in Postman, and I will add a new request, new collection.
So there's a careers and code.
Yeah, I just made a folder in Postman. Okay, new here, request. So this is going to be get I'm going to call this chat room colon get, and then the path where it is, which is /receive. So the get is the HTTP method, and this is the path.
Get, receive.
Just chat room and then get.
You can name this anything you want. You could say get messages, which might be easier to find later.
Chat room.
Oh, it's not chart room, it's chat room. Yeah,
Chat.
got it. Whoops. Just lost it. Get chat room, get messages. Okay. Now you can make folders if you want, but you probably don't need that many folders. So does everyone have a request here in Postman that is a new request? It doesn't have to be in a folder. It can be wherever you want it.
What do you mean? I mean, you've got this
So
page.
you're going to press new up at the top and then
Yeah.
new request.
Okay.
And you got to name that chat room. I named it chat room get messages. And you can select a folder to place it, but you can just leave that alone and then save at the bottom. And then you should see something like this where there's a green get here, which tells you the method. It's always going to put the method here and then the name you gave it.
Yeah, but the save is like grayed out.
Okay, I think maybe you need to pick somewhere to put it, I suppose. So you can create collection and call it
Cat.
Okay, I don't know. See it either. I mean, I have, like, I don't see it on this side, but I see it over here. That's the same one that you did.
you did new request?
Yeah.
And where did you choose to save it?
I can close these out, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can really reuse these and just change them whenever you want. If you don't want to save a whole lot of requests, you can just keep one request open and change it every time you make it. But if you want to store, a catalog of all the requests that you have made, then you're going to want to make a new one every time you put it in the folder. So scroll down. Where did you name it? The chat room, yeah.
But I don't see it over here.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe try save.
I don't know.
Well, we'll find that later, but you've got it open at least. Okay. So we're gonna have this address here. It's again localhost HTTP ://localhost the port, which is 8081, and then /receive. And here's our request. Empty messages, like we saw from the other client. Is this, okay. I just realized nobody is running the server, are you?
I am.
You're, okay, so, and you've got that response. Okay, so how did they do, I should, let me do local tunnel. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna run the server, and anybody who wants to connect to it from Postman will be able to access it here. So it's called Grumpy Deer 41. And let me make sure this actually works. Okay, so I'm gonna post what? Clear these out. I'm gonna leave this URL. So this is the URLs that are send and receive that we just reviewed. And this is actually what's running on my laptop. I'll post these two URLs in the chat, and you can drop these into Postman and then send or receive messages.
Is it okay if I just do it on my own server?
Absolutely, yeah. This is just if you can't get the server running on your own, or yeah, you just don't want to bother because I'll be changing some things, and you should be able to just use these. Now, instead of localhost colon 8081, I've opened a tunnel. There's a magic node thing where you can just open a tunnel to whatever port you want, and then they give you a web address that's available on the public internet. Anybody can go to that. It's very similar to what Glitch does. So we have our receive, and we do the get request, and we get our messages. Okay. So now this is a little more intuitive. You do a plus, and you get a new request. Great. This is much easier than the last one. So we're going to do put, and I'm going to paste in the send one. So this is how we send. And I'm actually going to add the correct methods to the beginning of these. Put this and get this. So you just copy this part into the address that you're using in Postman, but you select put and get with the method here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no authorization. This is wide open. Anybody on the internet can spam my laptop with messages whenever they want. And I'm going to go to the body of this and do raw. And then select from here JSON. Just about everything uses JSON. And this format is, you'll recognize it from what it returns and what just about everything with JavaScript objects uses. So I'm going to put the name in here and say Gus. And I'm going to put the message in. I'm going to say hello from the Genius Center in Syracuse, New York. So I will send this message, this put request. We get back okay. It doesn't really tell you much about what I sent, but I'm pretty sure it was this. So if we go back to the get tab here, I'm going to run this again, and this is going to hit the receive endpoint. And some people have already sent some empty messages. So if you don't include the name and the message, it doesn't actually error. It just is like, well, that particular property is undefined, and I'm JavaScript, so I don't even care. Like, you can have a name or not. So it ends up still saving messages, but they don't have a name or a message field in them. So they just have the timestamp because we're generating that every time it saves. So it generates that, but the other two are missing. So they're missing. But as you can see, here's the one I just sent. The timestamp has been added to it. And I can do this as many times as I want. I can say, message will be hello again. It does work. And it is very cool that something like this works. It is not as cool, I will admit, as having the web page and having the whole thing wired up and having all of that work. We are skipping that again because it's just too many things to juggle because we're going to really start to deep dive into the server part and the data part on the server. So for right now, all we need is to be able to make these two requests. The put, I say hello again. And then if we get it, well, Kate, you sent something with no message, but
I think I just typed messages instead of messages.
Right, okay. Yeah, it just silently is like, okay, and then it doesn't actually get your message. But so there's hello again from the Genius Center. So this makes sense, right? This will just run essentially forever or until it crashes. And we're going to be able to add messages to this big array. It'll just get longer and longer and longer. And every time someone tries to receive it, they're going to get all the messages that are here. Now, okay, now let's get to like database. This is going to, there's a point to this. And the point is, I'm running the server here. And there's already, okay, I'm gonna,
So that's
sorry.
all that happens. See the scroll down.
Does anyone know how to
That's
get
it. That's that
rid
means
of
you're
the
good.
split terminal?
Oh, it's not gonna,
Just hit it again, I think.
it's not gonna say
Okay.
this.
Well,
That's
it's
a third one.
but this is like the response area, so it doesn't hide the area. It just adds or that's a
Ah.
request area. It
The
doesn't
trash
hide the
can.
request area.
Okay.
It just adds a response area on the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So if it
someone,
wasn't working,
it looks like someone sent a request to this server that
But since you got
wasn't
status
even
update, that means it's
formatted
good.
as correct JSON, and that will actually make it crash.
Now you should see it.
Yeah,
So-
he knows me.
Okay.
Just gonna ask why you didn't go.
So it's probably because you might have forgotten the comma here, or you had an extra comma at the end.
Oh, I
And
forget.
Postman will actually detect that when you're preparing it. If you have it selected as raw and JSON
Yep.
here, it will actually mark
Yeah, no problem.
any errors that are badly formatted JSON. And that,
Wait, Alex.
so if I try to send with an extra comma at the end, that's not allowed in JSON land. So I'm gonna get a error, a big old error page here, which says unexpected token, and we'll see the same thing logged. And this, Ava's pretty much, that must be what you got back as
Yeah.
well.
But why did
You have an extra comma.
an extra combo?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is just review. It's working. Everyone's on Postman. This is great. This is very cool. It's actually working, and it's something we can all experiment with. Now I'll be able to use this to basically make the example server, and we'll keep this format where everyone can basically connect to the server. And that address might change if I have to restart the tunnel, but I'll post it in the channel. Okay. So here's the problem with this, right? We have our server's great, it's all working, but what if we reboot the server? What if we say close the server and then restart it? So I just closed the server and I've started it again. And now if we say we'll get messages,
Nothing. Oh, that's. Is the server you rebooted it?
I did reboot the server, but so
Oh, wait, you're doing get on send.
so my tunnel crashed as soon as I did that. So every time we reboot the server like this, we're gonna lose the address to the tunnel. That's wonderful.
Oh, 'cause the IP address is gonna change every time.
Yep. So we run the server at 1. We do local tunnel. This one is perfect kangaroo 97. And I will update this message with the new addresses. So we're not going to be restarting this a whole lot because that's pretty annoying, but my point is that if we get this back up and we restart it, I have the old one. I get the new one. Our messages are empty again. So what happened? Why are the messages empty now?
We didn't save them?
Yeah, there's no, like, that was what that whole save endpoint was for. This Max made a third here called get/save. And if you save, it's going to write out to a text file, and then you'll have a full text log of all your messages, right? And it's saved permanently now. So if you close it, if you restart it, you get those back, right? Another problem though, even if we did that, even if we sent this save thing and then restarted the server, there's no load. There's no like do the reverse of that, which is go find a file on the hard drive that's still there and take the contents of that and import them so that they are all become part of this array here. So there's no actual way to like permanently save and then load it. We'd have to add that. And then the second problem with this is that, well, there's three problems, really. The first one is we don't have the save and load in place. The second one is that we have to call save every time. You have to count on somebody actually saying save and then running that code to actually write to the disk anytime you wanted to save it. And if the server restarts or crashes or whatever at the, right before you get a chance to call that, you would lose whatever happened right before that, right? So you have to save it, and saving is something that can only happen at certain times. And it's something that would not be possible to do if, let's say, 5 or 10 people were all trying to send messages at the same time and you wanted to save it. It would have to do all of that one at a time, because the server doesn't run everything in parallel. It's going to go through and handle each request. It's actually a little more complicated, but only one real thing only one non-asynchronous thing, like writing to the disk or reading from the disk or writing data or reading data from a web request, can happen at one time. So you'd get one person saves a message, one person sends a message, another person sends a message, the third person sends a message, but a fourth person tries to save it at the same time. It would save it first, and then their message is not saved because it's been added to the array, but the processing did not happen. So it's not happening for every request, and it's not safe to be able to do it at the same time, because this server doesn't work like that. So there's really no way to guarantee that everything that has been sent to the server has been saved, except if you were to basically write every single request that comes in, you were to pause everything else, say no more requests can be handled until this happens. And this is going to a disk, so this is very slow for what a computer does. Pause everything, say open a file or create a new file, write that file, answer the request, and then unpause everything. You'd have to do that for every request. And that's not, that wouldn't be a problem. That's actually not a problem in like any kind of development situation, or in a lot of smaller applications where it's a database that's not being used, or a server that's not being used by a lot of people. But as soon as you have it being used by a lot of people, there will be a time when 100 people happen to all request it in the same second, and when that happens, you're going to have a lot of trouble going back and forth between the disk, and the server will slow down. So it has to be able to do that kind of thing smartly and very fast. Even if we were to solve that second problem, there's still a third problem, which is that what if we wanted two different servers? We wanted to scale out. We wanted to say these 4 or 5 servers are all going to be handling requests from people all around the world, and we're going to put, one of them we're going to put them in different countries, or we're going to have them in different zones, so that if part of Amazon's cloud crashes, we still have some other zones. You want to distribute it for many reasons, for load, geographic reasons, and reliability, so that you always have at least one that's going to be working. If we did that, each one still has its own disk and its own hard drive, and it's writing there, or it's saving to memory. There's no way for them to share that data. So that's really the biggest problem, and the one that you can't really solve easily, except with a database. So what is a database, and why does it solve this? A database is another kind of program, really. It's sort of like your server. It's more like the server than it's like the web page, the client on the web page, or fetch, or any of that. It answers requests. So you make requests to a database, and it sends you back data. It does this, it runs its own server, and it often uses its own whole protocol. So instead of it all being GET requests and HTTP requests, you don't make those kinds of requests directly to the database. your server code will make requests in database protocol to the database. And there's many kinds of database protocols, and I don't really know any of them, like what they are, but you don't have to, because whoever makes the database makes the protocol and makes the tools to connect to it. And they're all, unless you really want to build databases, in which case you're gonna be doing a lot of work. You're not going to care what the protocol is. You're going to care what database you're using and how you're supposed to connect to it from your application. So the database runs its own program. The program is just responsible for saving and loading data and manipulating data. It automatically knows when it has to save data to the hard drive. It will automatically batch that. And when it's necessary for it to guarantee that a power cut won't lose data, it will write it to the hard drive before it says everything's okay. So it will handle all of these cases pretty much out of the box. And most databases will also let 10 or 100 different clients, different servers even, all try to write data at the same time. And it will allow them to write the data at the same time, as long as they don't try to write the same data. So if we tried to put the same message, if each message has an identifier, or we're trying to edit the message in position 2 or position 3, and there was 100 people, well, you can't let everybody do that, because one person can edit it at a time. Really, you don't know what it used to be, so how can you know how to edit it? So unless that happens, most databases will just let people make edit requests all the time, and on to overlapping each other at the same time. And as long as none of them are conflicting, just like we see with Git commit conflicts, and as long as people aren't trying to edit the same data, it will have no problem with that, and it will handle many writes at the same time and reads at the same time. It can handle as many reads as you want at the same time, really. Okay, so how does this fit in? What does this mean for your application? So we're going to sort of set this up over the course of the next couple of days, but the basic pattern is you have a client, which is your website or your web application or your iOS application or your Android application, or another computer that nobody's using, but it's a computer that's doing something. That's a client, which is going to connect to your server. Now your server is just like we have here, server.js. This is our server. This is a program which is supposed to handle connections coming in from clients and do something with them and allow them to do useful things. Rather than having the server say, okay, I have a variable now that's the messages, and this messages is an array, and I add things to this array and I send the array back when it's requested. That's good for this example, and it's an easy way to have this one single server work very quickly and very simply. But when you add a database to this, you don't let any of the servers own the data, and the servers really should not remember any data. There's a principle called stateless servers, where you actually don't want your server to remember anything except for what it's doing with the current request. So every time somebody says get or put or whatever to the server, it should process that request and then forget that it ever happened. And it should be back to just as if you started up right again at the next time you do that. So what that means is all of the data that you want to stick around, everything that's going to be managed or saved or loaded by many requests over the course of many requests, or for more than just the duration of one request and then poof, it's all gone. All of the data you want us to last and to stay, you're going to want to put in a database. And you do that by having your server makes another connection. So your client connects to your server, and then your server here is going to go connect to a database, which is like another kind of server. And the server is going to read or write the data that you're trying to work with on behalf of the client. So if I have a user ID and I have a password or a secret token that basically allows me to be this user, logged in user, whatever, I send a message to the server saying, I would like to save this message, or I would like to save this email, or I would like to save this document or whatever. And the server will then accept that data that you send it and verify that you're allowed to do whatever you're trying to do usually, and then pass that data along into some other thing, which is responsible just for saving and maintaining the data. This is very, very common. You'll see this in pretty much every single website that's not just an advertisement page, or like anything that has editable content or user, web 2.0, anything that's user manageable, Facebook, YouTube, anybody they work with enormous amounts of data, and they're all going to use a database on the other side of your server. So then, the database will respond with something, okay, or here's your data, whatever it's going to say back. And then the server is responsible for sending that back along to the client. So typically the client is never going to connect directly to the database. That's not really, not something you want to let clients do usually, because it's a lot closer to, being hackable basically. If you can connect to the database and do one thing you can't do, then you have access to all of the data. You usually put, the server in the middle, because it makes a much more friendly interface. You can customize what the client can do and how the messages that it has to send. You can make them very friendly, just like we saw this send and receive. We're crafting these to be a very friendly way to send and receive messages. And then we're going to handle all the details of where they go in the database and how we're going to retrieve them. If we have to filter them, then we'll filter them. If we have to link them together in different ways, we'll do that. Okay. So is there any questions about that concept of that's the purpose of a database? It's another kind of server, and it deals with data. Make sense? Okay. In the real world, it might look more like this, and this diagram even gets bigger, but this is a pretty straightforward, you'll see this kind of thing pretty often in the real world. Each user, let's say this is your laptop, this is your client, this is connecting to your server, but your server's somewhere in here, and there might be 10 of them. So what you do is you put a load balancer. It's another kind of, basically another kind of server, but all it does is route the traffic coming from one client, and it hands it off to one of the servers. So let's say there's 5 servers. It says, okay, server 1, you got this one. Server 2, you got this one. Server 3. That's all this is doing. This is one place. It's in the address of your website or your web service. So any client can find it, but then it has the job of basically portioning out the load, the work that has to be done by the computers to more than one server potentially. And then each of those servers is probably going to connect to, in most cases, most normal cases, it's going to connect to the same database server. If you get to huge, enormous scale, you might need lots of pieces of your database and like shards and things that are like, so the database can get extremely complicated too. And there's sometimes more servers in the middle, and we'll look at that a little bit in several weeks, but this is generally the pattern. So you can have as many of these app servers as you want. None of them are responsible for remembering data at all. So it doesn't matter which one you hand a request to. It should never matter. It's you're just saying, well, which one's available, which one can respond to the next request. It doesn't remember anything about the previous request, and it's using the database for all saving and loading, which is one thing, and it's very good at that. So this allows you to basically say, okay, we need more processing to load these messages or to do whatever, to talk to many clients. We have millions of them or whatever. So you can just say, I'd like 20 servers, I'd like 100 servers. And until you have to actually break apart the database, it's still very easy, comparatively. Okay.
So that also records like any click or views that like if I'm on Amazon, if I click on a product, but I don't actually log in or.
It could, yeah,
Okay.
it absolutely could. Now, there's a thing called Mixpanel, which will basically do exactly that. So every time you go on a link, there's a little piece of code, a little bit of JavaScript, which is going to say, I just saw a click on this page and it went to this other page, and here's whatever information you know about the user. If you're logged in, it would have that. If not, you're not logged in. And then it takes that bundle of data and it's going to send that with fetch or with a request up to mixpanel.com, which sort of scoops up all this data, and then you can go there later and say, oh, 100 people clicked here, 200 people clicked here. That's their whole business.
I mean, that's what they want to know. I mean, like why you didn't log in or what you were looking at, and then you got to. I mean, that's a business.
Sure.
Piece of business intel, right?
Right, but that's not the only. I mean, that's not the only reason to send this data. Like if you make a post on someone's Facebook wall, is there even still a wall on Facebook? So you post on someone's Facebook, whatever that means.
Page.
Your web browser is likewise going to say, hey, facebook.com, here's some data which has a text of a post, which might have a link to an image or the data of an image or whatever, and you're going to send all of that to the server that Facebook runs, and they're going to save that in their Facebook database. Now, they might also have Mixpanel or whatever, but they probably have their own thing because they're huge. So anyway, yeah, it could be used for, any kind of purpose like that. And it doesn't really matter what, the data is bits. It can be anything you want. It can be text. Text is easy to do. It can be pictures. It can be video. It can be, binary, some kind of strange format protocol that you invent, and it's just ones and zeros. And but usually you're going to be using text and JSON and things that would fit nicely in JavaScript because it's pretty standard. It's pretty universal. Okay. Why don't we take a break right now, and then let's get into the next phase, which is setting up a relational database and Docker on everyone's computer. We're having a fun day of trying to set up everything we need today, and I'm sorry for the how tedious it is, but anyway, let's go on a 10 or 15 minute break. And we won't have that much time to set up database, but we're not going to be learning what we're doing this for today. We're just going to be doing some stuff, and you'll see some stuff. Okay. Pause, share, stop. Sure. Right, okay. That's the worst thing. That's the worst thing ever. You're going to want to use Postman or run the server on your own computer because this. Do you run the server? So go to. Do you have the latest from GitHub? Okay. So go to. Try fetching. 1 second. Let me make sure that I've pushed all of the package.json. Oh yeah, we don't need fetch because that doesn't even work. Okay, so do a pull from GitHub. That, oh, I'm gonna add that DS store thing because that's probably what's breaking everybody's stuff. Are they? Okay, so try pulling again. Hopefully those two that were there will disappear.
I can undo it.
Well, yeah, you could discard, but it shouldn't even.
Oh.
That's fine. You pull, or you discard, go open it, and you discard all changes. And now there was a discard 2 changes. Do it again. Sure. So there's still 93 stage changes. That's oh, now there's none. Okay, yeah, whatever. Try to pull again, make sure. Okay, you're all there. Okay, so go to the terminal. You can open the terminal in VS Code. It's view menu. Cool. Okay, so do ls. Just enter it. Okay, so cd space plus cost or g and then tab. Hit the tab key. But then hit the tab key and it will actually complete the whole thing. And do cd chat and hit tab again. And then, so now you're in this folder. Do npm install space install. So this is looking in the folder. Can you put the files there? So see how there's a folder called item. There's supposed to be a file there that I just pushed. Maybe.
I'm gonna just load it from GitHub right now.
Yeah, maybe that's good. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay. Oh, you should, okay.
Won't stop.
That's what I thought. I thought it was somebody like printing, you know, it's trying to do something. Just the door trying to open.
Oh. Maybe I can take care of that.
Well, it's on an alarm window, so.
It's still bugging.
Right now, I tried to hold this to it. Max was trying to get him for it. I don't like, I can't, my icon, can't get my icons to be normal,
What do you mean?
so. I can bring. Because I wanted to use icons that are like. So I want to use icons that are like.
Yeah.
Colored, so I tried some.
Nice.
Like, it's not supposed to look like that. I want it to look, because I redid the whole, like, how it's gonna be laid out.
Mhm.
So I'm just put my back here, and then I'm gonna put the settings here, and then,
Yeah.
you know, do kind of like that. But when I started messing with icons, I got that. And I was like,
Where's it pulling?
that's part of my problem, I think. Because I'm getting the icons from.
Okay, now I'm getting, I'm pausing, call me slide there.
Yeah, sorry, I think I missed a couple slides, so I'm just trying to catch up on.
Okay. Okay, so are you running the,
Gotcha, okay.
okay, so you have
So I have,
packages
like-
and you run npm install? Do that again. And then this program is called server.js. So you can just do node space server.js. That will start it up.
See, I like saved all these.
Node.
Yeah.
Server. No, it's
Can you show me your code for the
npm
one?
is for packages
Yeah.
and installing. Node is what actually runs the JavaScript
Oh, I don't want
program,
that.
which is right here.
Oh.
So you just give it the name of the
File, where did that go?
Well, you did do npm install, right? Or are you in a different folder now? There's no package.json.
This is as far as I got.
Gotcha, let's see.
That's mine. So you're in your own folder. I think you have to copy.
Oh, you can make it bigger, whatever you
Oh.
want to do to make it.
And what's in package.json?
Go back to your, let's see, where's one, up one
It's-
text?
Okay, so
Oh, this
do
one, sorry.
npm install it.
Let's see what this is called, I can search for it.
No, it shouldn't matter because
Yeah,
you
so I
you
got
are
it,
in
okay.
that. you-
Yeah, because I
really-
put them all in their own folders, so I can just go and drop.
Oh, you're in my, so do
And it has
cd
all this stuff in it.
dot dot slash dot
Gotcha,
dot
okay.
whatever.
Like you can
Do
open it
cd
and
do it again.
see what I mean, like-
I found it's right here, I think.
Oh, yeah, oh, and yeah,
Yeah, sorry, I was looking for it in the code.
sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, now do.
So have you worked with
cd
setting
space
sizes for images before?
animate.
Sort of. But it was like through
Now
like
do cd space.
CSR.
Yeah, yeah.
But. So I'm like,
Chart room.
Well-
how do I-
Do that too.
So do I still need to do like the whole CSS?
You can
So
just
in
do
this case, you
tab.
probably want to set
They're all
the
good.
size.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you could do it that way.
As long as
So-
there's nothing else that starts
What
with
is
those
this,
characters,
What's
you'll know what you're.
this in right now? Navbar.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
so
that's
now
where I want
try
it. I need to
npm
have them,
install.
that's the only way I can try, you know, just try it. I mean, I know it's probably not up immediately.
So it looks like the problem is it's not resizing your icon. Otherwise, the nav bar is smaller. So I guess if you set the content size of your nav bar to be, how do we?
Okay, servers running. So now the
'Cause I
last
just pulled
thing you
that
might
from
have to do is go to
Yeah,
these
yeah.
here.
These two things, I just put those from Bootstrap, and then I'm like.
Now, did you change those back
Why
to?
can't I change the size of that? Why can't I? And I mean, I
Open that
looked at all of
index.
this over here, and I messed with it, and doing that,
Did you
and
change
then I
those
was trying to
back
find, because it, when you click on it,
localhost?
it shows
These
you
all
the
have to
size,
be-
pixels, I'm looking for it, I
Yeah.
couldn't find it, so I don't know.
So the nav bar grows to be the size of what the
Okay, so
size.
that was right. Maybe it'll work.
So if we resize the image here. Let's make it a 64 by 64 height. 64.
Can't think of anything.
Oh, see, now that's getting better,
Yeah, yeah. So
Why?
because I tried to save it
Why
that
do
way
you have
on
it,
the website, I wouldn't do it.
Why do you have it at
What if-
5500?
I'm not saving, like.
Yeah.
Should I
So-
change it to both of those?
sometime,
Because I-
Yeah, so you should do local, so
I guess it really depends on how you want to do it. So like
do localhost.
Android phones, right, for example, they have
Not
different
bad.
screen resolution based on it. So in order to upload something to Google Play, for example, you have to make sure you have high res
8081.
icons for each of the sizes. So you have like an XXXL, which is like 128, and one lower, which is like 64, one even lower than that, which is 32. So they can all be kind of the same
Yeah,
size.
because, I
And
mean,
then
it
that's it,
it
because I
tells
think
you,
this will show you the tape, no?
like, it's because, so here's the one. Right, so when you bring it up and you want to save it, it lets you, if you use this,
You're still
Yeah.
running.
you can change it.
Here's your term.
right?
Mhm.
But I couldn't get it to, I couldn't get it to do that, so then I could use it in
Yeah, you have to be running the server
my
first.
code, yeah.
So what happens when you try? What happens if right now if you try and save
You
this?
probably just
something
want
It's
to
in
leave
this
it open
stupid
all the
thing.
time.
It's in this, so I made it custom.
You're gonna have to go into NIA again.
I made it custom, I went in and edited it. Didn't edit now.
Oh,
So
so-
that's what it did, it saved it like this time. but
CH tab.
You can go,
red.
so let's, if we just put in,
CH and then tab.
oh, right,
You'll totally
okay.
get it. Yeah,
And we'll just
no
pick
problem.
this one because
And
it's
then
not in my
node
collection.
server. Gotcha.
So, did I do anything on these stuff?
You shouldn't need to do it every time, but it doesn't hurt to do it again.
So
if
it
you want
automatically
to.
downloaded it, see?
Yeah.
Then how do I get?
Okay.
It saved it.
Yeah.
But
So in this case, you just copy the icons folder.
sure, just, I mean, like, I guess, in order to use the full code,
So you
I guess
have
maybe that's
them
what I
in
can
another,
figure out.
some, like, you do another
Like,
folder,
when it
another
saves it
terminal
here,
somewhere.
and then if I put it in,
It says it's
so,
already
okay,
done.
let's save it and just, wherever, how would just,
Do you have another VS code?
So you probably went over to Finder. It's probably in your downloads folder.
Okay. That's
Nope,
fine.
it's right there. Oh, you can, if you click that, the bars, yes, that gives you your default
Ah.
view.
I did it yesterday too. So,
Left arrow, I think it was towards the top.
here, okay,
Oh, it moved, okay, cool.
so then I would just take that and put it into the folder.
Yeah.
Yep.
and then
Get to the same folder. I'll be right back.
Yeah, so you would.
That was,
Like,
so I would just take the, ooh, what is it?
Check
Check mix.
So I would just take.
Oh, love check mix. We'll have to hold me back from eating all of it.
And it should be inside there, right? Right, so it's here.
Mhm.
Then if I threw it into like the.
Yep.
Because it didn't open. There's like two, there's HTML now, and then there's the file. If you go open this file, there's like, this is like crazy. Like, it gives
Oh,
you
so it
all-
downloaded all your icons for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Oh,
It downloads all of my icons, but it does them at like the ginormous, and actually gave me some that I didn't even had in there.
yeah.
But if I went to, so let's say I go to, so this is the collections, right? When I go to download this, see what it does?
Yeah.
And then it doesn't give me the option to like change that. I can download it as anything I want, but.
So, okay, as an exercise for you, there are command line utilities you can use to I don't know, be able to just do it from the image editor. I don't remember. I haven't done it in a while, sorry.
That's okay.
So there's utilities you can use to bulk resize PNGs.
No.
So you can get one of those.
Not
You can
working.
just set it to resize all your
What did it say this
images
time?
to document 32 or whatever. And that would take care of it for you. Honestly, I would leave them as 128 and figure out how to resize them on your tab.
So do the height width.
Yeah, height width.
So leave them as what they are. Because I mean, actually,
Yeah, because you have.
If you want to get really fancy with it, you can like do custom sizes based on device size.
You should.
So like,
do
maybe book slightly smaller on a desktop, but bigger on like a mobile phone.
yeah, because this is probably, right, so
There it is.
see, this is,
There's messages.
There's
Send
hot
will
coffee in
definitely
the
work.
coffee
So wait,
maker.
it did this, but we made it.
Right.
Oh, really? I might.
And
So
there's
you're saying
popcorn
leave it
and
at 128
popcorn.
so that it can do work.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Yeah, so-
Android and.
There's coffee.
Look, your language, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I
I
was
mean,
surprised
so the
because
reason-
usually when I press the button, there's
Usually
like
when you
nothing in
want
the
to have
coffee
smaller
machine.
images
Oh.
because you're
But
going
you know, all of the
to
instant
big
stuff is
images.
gone, but
you
there's
Are you talking about that?
So 128 is
Yeah,
a
there's-
very
Oh, I was talking about my
how many
Chrome.
images?
Yeah, there's,
It's probably not.
oh, okay.
It'll look,
Yeah, there's popcorn.
so here's how I changed it. I'm getting some, because I went through it.
Yeah, and your
Yeah.
kids bought some checks in it.
It's pretty much like check.
The checks mix something.
I don't know. That won't fit that way. So there's, I mean, I didn't put all of the images in yet,
The
but
popcorn is good, it's
but
nice
actually,
and
like
buttery.
this isn't gonna be one, like it's gonna be separate editions, then whatever one will pop up. But, I mean, like, there aren't, I can't say there's a ton, and I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm gonna have that to work with that or not. In the settings, I have to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I was really frustrated, I was like, I mean, I must have spent hours trying to figure out how to get this. And I didn't even think to put those in there. And I'm like, why is this not working? This should work. You know, like, I'm like. No, you do it that way, I just need to put it in a container, but.
Okay, I think we're still on YouTube.
I think we are.
I don't think I turned it off. I hope.
Oh.
Okay,
I mean,
so
you probably could do it in Bootstrap too. I don't
That's
know
okay,
how to do
that's
it.
Syracuse,
But
we got the
this is
regular, the
definitely a way you
coffee
can
and
do
the
it. Just
popcorn.
do a
Yeah.
CSS, give that image
no free
a
pop.
Hi,
class or
Syracuse.
something,
Right.
and then use that class to set the image. So Bootstrap isn't 100% for everything. It's mostly for like layouts and like the styling of broad elements. Like until it needs to do some custom CSS, you know, for something.
Yeah, yeah, the
Yeah,
database
I
link
think
itself
that- I mean,
will be the new part, but
I
everything
I
else
don't
is
know.
just kind of like.
Maybe Bootstrap might be good for other things, but I don't think that's gonna be good for this. I think I'm gonna have to just.
Okay, well, the next step for everyone, I just posted in the channel. And if, you know, if people are on the way back, we'll
I mean,
maybe do this a couple times, but get a head start. Go to this docker.com/whatever in the channel, load that page up. And this page is
there's no rule
installed
saying you have to use everything
Docker for
in
Mac.
Bootstrap.
There's all these instructions
You
and
can use the
whatnot.
parts that work for you in this case.
You want to go to the stable channel,
Nice, like,
which is
layout that you can use.
stable channel,
And then you can do everything else that Bootstrap can't do
Oh,
yourself, like resizing your
and
image,
get
so it
Docker for
makes it
Mac
have
stable.
words be
And
gigantic.
that is going to download
When I first,
an installer.
the only reason that this got really big was because the icon. was
And then you want to run that installer and follow all the instructions.
Right,
And like, I'm
Okay.
sure that this isn't
Um,
going to be.
Yeah.
You know?
And it might take a little while
You
to
can definitely
download.
resize it in CSS and then leave Bootstrap as it
Mine
is, because
says
other than the
this
size,
mixed
it's not
selection with
fine.
large number
Yeah.
of files.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause when I took that, I took it out. Like,
What?
did I even see student
Doesn't sound
resources?
right.
It's on the general channel.
If you took it out, if you took the image out, the hashtag.
I understand. It's very frustrating.
And I was like, no, like, I was gonna.
Which ones,
Those are released.
The hashtag. You know, tomorrow. Finally, actually. Yeah. Come for the.
That's fair. It's good to take care of something. Sorry.
Okay, but at least that.
Yeah. Yep. If you have any other questions, you know,
Okay. Thank you.
no problem.
that's what we installing?
Okay, so again, there is a link in the students channel. Thank you, Linda. We are in YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Hope everyone's doing well out there in the world. It's not raining anymore. All right, this link here goes to Docker for Mac. You want to go to the stable channel and download this. This will be a 500 or something megabyte download. I already did that earlier, so I have it right here. Now I already have it installed, so I could uninstall, but I think it's pretty simple to, it's just a wizard, you just install to the default hard disk. Oh no, you drag and drop, cool. I'm gonna quit and just see how this works. Replace.
It's so cute.
Yeah, see, it's like a little whale that's like a container ship.
It's adorable.
And this is what, we'll get into why, but they call it containers when you're running programs with Docker. Now, we're not doing this because we need to today. We're doing this because databases, there's a lot of different kinds you could try. And I don't want to go through a whole setup of how to install my favorite database on Mac. And then Macs will be like, no, I like this other database. So all of them can work with Docker. And we're going to need to look into this stuff a little bit for like DevOps and network administration and infrastructure in about 3 or 4 weeks. So we're going to be using Docker for real. Right now, we're just using it because it's an easy way to get a database. Okay, so once you drag and drop that to there, it should copy. And then if you're sure with command spacebar and type Docker, or find it in your applications folder here in your Finder, if that doesn't work. And it's this tiny little whale.
The DMG file won't open for me.
We are really happy to have you.
What happens when you double click it? Nothing.
I guess we need to create a.
You sure it's not in the background somewhere? No? Maybe reboot. I don't know. Has everybody got the installer up and seen this at least?
Yeah, it wants us to create an account.
Now try to skip,
I'll skip that.
should be able to skip that. So you can see there's this little tiny icon up in the top now, which has these little containers on the whale. It's very small, but that's Docker. So that if you install it and you start it up, you should see that animate for a little while, and then that's your Docker menu. So that has all your, I don't know, stuff, check for updates or whatever.
So it's been telling us the different Docker commands. That's nice.
Oh, cool. So-
Docker version, Docker images. It
Im-
says, open your favorite terminal and run Docker commands.
Okay, let's try that out. See, I guess I didn't get the tutorial because it must have seen my Docker folder.
Oh,
It's already there. Okay. This node server.js, you can't connect to the server anymore for right now. And it's going to change the next time we start it up, which will probably be tomorrow. But anyway, now we have Docker. And if you type Docker,
Okay. But like, what, why don't we just set up an ID because, or how do we avoid setting up an ID? for
there
not-
should be a skip option. There's no skip. You can close. I think
Still
you
says
can just
it's
close it.
running. It does say only your terminal that run Docker commands.
Just close the X and open the
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, but then how do I use?
So,
open terminal.
oh, so drag this to application. And then go to application and see if you can find it there.
So do we install it into the project?
No, so this is totally separate from the project.
Okay.
I would reboot your computer and delete that and then copy it again. Does it work when you rebooted?
I had to re-download it.
Okay.
And I saved it and I had it download to desktop and that worked. I don't know if it was just a fluke,
Okay.
but
Did you reboot?
the whole computer?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Maybe, here says you might have to re-download it.
So do I have to?
I don't have anything. I was gonna type Docker in the terminal, and see what happens.
Yeah, you got it, it's running.
Oh.
Yeah, I would keep it in applications, I move it, or it's already in. Okay. No, it's on your Docker. Okay, you can put it on your desktop. But you don't need to click it or run it all the time, as long as you have that action.
Oh, so we're not doing anything else?
Not yet.
Okay. Sounds good.
We'll get to that. I just want to make sure everyone good. Docker is very good. Got it working? Yep. Docker working? Yeah. Cool. Cool. Very good. All right. Very good. You got everything over there?
Yep, all set.
Cool. Okay. So what are we doing? What is this? Okay, so there's some more theory and stuff, but I think I'm going to save that for another time because it's, let's just finish up our, let's get all this working on the first day this time maybe so that we can do the rest of the stuff and learn the stuff with the rest of the time. Okay, first step is install Docker. What is Docker? It's a way that you can build images, what's called images, and they package together a bunch of files like a Unix program along with all of its dependencies. Unix is a kind of computer. A Mac is Unix. This actually works in a virtual like Linux or something. So it's Linux, it's like server stuff. And this is going to be just about everywhere in the world of very hip development. A lot of companies are not hip enough yet to have Docker as part of their like stack or whatever. And the ones that are hip will tell you about it all the time, that they're hip enough to have Docker, But it's a very popular, very common way to basically package together a program like a web server or a database or really anything that runs on Linux with everything it needs to run, and then be able to just sort of drop it anywhere. So you can develop against a version here and then take that same image and run it on your server, and it should run the same. It's the idea anyway. These images, when they're running, it's put in what's called a container. So that's why there's those containers on the whale, because Docker sort of supports these packaged up containers, and each one runs an application that you want to run. But they are given limited permissions by default, and you have to sort of explicitly allow them to connect or do things so that you get a little bit of extra security as well. It's very popular again, and we will be using this to deploy. So once we get into like administrating deployment, there's 1 week on that, and we'll be doing deploying your own web servers with Docker. We're just going to use it right now. We're just going to use it to download a pre-built version of a database so that we can just use the database right away. And it's one of the easiest ways to do this as well. So that's just very useful. Okay. So we already did the first one. Everyone's got Docker for Mac. Now we're going to run some commands from our terminal. The first one is Docker pull Postgres. So this is, we are asking it for a container that's up on the registry, what they wanted you to log into. There's like a website like GitHub, like npm.js, but it's for Dockers, and it's called Docker Hub. And any like common setup of software, like there's one for Python, there's one for Node, there's ones for like programs like Ruby on Rails or whatever, and they're all packaged up Dockers, which are ready to go to run a particular kind of app. This Postgres is a database. So this one is basically a packaged up and ready to run database. And this will sit in a container, and you'll be able to connect to it, and you'll be able to do all of that with very little setup comparatively. Now, all the commands are in the presentation here, but they're kind of, verbose, and I'm going to type them out verbatim. And I'll explain what they're doing, but don't worry about if you would know how to write these, because I had to look them up, and don't worry about it. So we're going to do mkdir, and this says make directory. The next part is -p, and then we're going to do $ all capitals home like this, HOME. Now this is, I think, the same as the tilde character. So when I say do the tilde character, that's your home directory. I think this is just another way to do that. And we're going to make a folder called Docker, and then another folder in that called volumes, and then another folder in that called Postgres. So this means we're going to just all we're doing right now with this is making a folder somewhere on our file, on our computer. And this is in your home folder /docker/volumes/Postgres. It's just a new folder. It's a standard place to put files that you want to use with Docker. But what this will do is let us restart or use different versions of the database as much as we want and share the files. So have the files always saved in a place where we can find them separately if we need to. If you don't do this kind of thing, then all of the files that you make or use are going to be all packaged up into that container and not really referenceable anywhere outside of it. And we don't want that. We want our files to persist, because if we work on this database for several days, we want to be able to start, reboot the computer, restart Docker, and keep those files. So then this is the big one. I might copy this one, and you might want to as well. Or, you know what? I'm going to type it out, but I'm going to paste it right up here so I can see it. Okay, this is the for all the marbles here. We're going to do we'll say run. You call Docker is a particular image, and I want you to start up a new container and run whatever this image is in that new container. So this is going to cause a new container to be created. The -D here is demonize or something, and that's like run it as a daemon, and daemon means in the background. It's like a reference to Maxwell's daemon. It's very obscure, but this means run it not in my terminal here and wait for the prompt. This means just run it off in the background somewhere else on the computer and give me back the terminal, but keep it running. We're going to say --rm after that. Now this is a way to say when the container is done running, remove the container. Because if you don't do that, it'll leave the container around forever, even after it's closed, even after you're done running your program, it'll leave it there. And that's okay, but that can clutter up, that can get to be a lot of files. So this says remove the container as soon as it's done running. Now we're going to name it something. So you do --name. And this is anything you want. In the example, I have PG. Why don't we name it Postgres or whatever you want. Then we can pass it its own environment variables. So these are variables that are going to be set in the environment inside the container. And the environment is just a special place that shell code and all of this stuff can store special variables. And it's it's going to be used more in the deployment, and we'll get into environments and deployment soon, but don't worry about it. We just pass this in. This is a special one, which the Postgres image is going to understand what to do with. And this is going to set the main password on our database. So I just made the password CIC equals, Postgres password equals CIC. And it should be much more secure than this. It should be much harder to guess if you're doing it for real on a real server, but this is on my laptop, and I'd rather it be convenient, so I'm going to make it very simple password. Now -p tells it to say, I want to take a port inside the container and actually connect that to a port that's on my computer. So the same way we're running a server on port 8081, and we have, all this other stuff runs on ports. Containers have their own kind of ports inside them, and they have their own whole place. And you need to actually say, I want to connect this one as if it was a totally different computer to the port on my actual computer. So the normal place that you connect to, the port that Postgres runs on, and it runs its own protocol, it's its own server, like I was saying, the port that it normally runs on is 5432. So we're just going to connect that right up to my computer's 5432. So we're going to say, inside the container, this port will be connected right to the same port outside the container. That's all.
What is that before the 5432?
The -p or the colon?
Oh, it's -p. Okay.
Yeah, -p, it stands for port, and the colon is like either side of it is like inside. I forget which one is first, but one of them is inside the container and outside the container. -v means I want to connect, just like we're connecting up a port from inside the container to outside, I want to connect a folder. So I want to say this folder, the one that we just made with the previous command, I want to connect that so that a folder inside the container is the same as this folder. So if I write anything to the outside folder, it'll show up in the inside folder. And if I write anything to the inside folder, it'll show up in the outside folder. So this one's a bit long, but it's the same kind of thing where this must be outside. The first one is outside and the second one is inside. So we're going to say $, all capitals, home, /docker /volumes /Postgres. That's the outside folder that we just made. And we're going to have a colon here. And this is the inside folder from the containers perspective. It has its own folders. And this is the normal default place for the database files to be saved when you're using Postgres. So we're connecting this folder we made that's for our purposes to the place where it's going to place all of its data. And then the last argument has no dash anything. This is just the image we want to run. So it's going to find, because we did Docker pull Postgres, we went and looked up on the internet, I want this special image named Postgres. And that's what we're going to try to run. That's at the very end of all of this. It's like, here's what we're actually running with all of these crazy options. So I hope you typed all of that in right, because you can always hit up and get it back and try to edit it. But this is quite a big command here. Okay, so I get this big old blob of, these look like hexadecimal. They're all 0 through 9 and then A through F. So there's 16. This is some kind of hash. Maybe it's just a unique string that represents the whole container. What I just did, I just started a container that has this identifier. Okay, so that didn't appear to do anything except print out this string. But if you did this right and you see this, did everyone see this? Mm-hmm. Anyone not see this? That's like.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
Okay.
But I think I don't know how forward. I don't know.
Port is already allocated.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did you run it twice?
Did I copied it and pasted it at one point.
Okay, so do Docker space. So the next thing we're going to do is checking what's running with Docker space PS. So this is really hard to see with the big text and everything, but it should print on one giant line, if it's small enough, a list of all of your running containers. Because I've just started this one, I have a container which matches that big blob of text here. Image is Postgres, that's what we downloaded. The command is whatever they set it up to run, Postgres. It was created about a minute ago. The port maps is 5432 to 5432. The name is Postgres because I said the name. It doesn't tell me anything about the disk that's mapped to the container, but we know that's mapped to the container. What happens if you run?
I did that.
Yeah, so you do have it running. So you must have copied it before.
Yeah.
So you're all set. I mean, you don't have to
Okay.
do it. And it'll only let you do this once until you stop this container, because you can't say, well, I want another thing to have 5432 bound to 5432, because only one thing can listen on a port at a time. So that's why it didn't let you do it twice. Okay, so we have Postgres, we have it running. This is a database. This is running on our computer. This is running in a Docker. A Docker is a crazy thing that you don't need to worry about right now, but it's a nice way to run a database. And that's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to get this database working. If you reboot your computer or restart Docker, you're going to have to put just that one big long command in again to get it to run again. And we can set it up if you'd like. I can help you configure your computer so it will run every time your computer starts. But I would just save that command somewhere, in case you need to pull it out in the next couple weeks. And it's in the slides, and I'll, yeah, just let me know if you need help with it, because that is quite a, that's a lot. And I think we should just sort of like celebrate that we actually did that.
Yay.
Hooray. It's a database. We have a database. Great. It's not doing anything, but it's a database and it's running. Okay. So we just ran this, Docker PS. This prints out all of the running containers, everything that's currently running. Now to get inside this container, to say, okay, I want to go into this container and do something, you want to take this container ID or the name. I think you can do it with the name too. So does everybody name it Postgres? Okay, we should be able to do this with the name. We can do Docker exec. Now, this is something that trips people up a lot, and you don't have to memorize it or whatever, but run, when you do Docker run, you're running an image. So you have an image and it's not running yet. You've just prepared some package thing that can be put into a container. And then once you have the container, you see it here when you list the containers with Docker PS. In order to join that container, in order to like jump into the container that's already running, you have to use this other command called exec. So don't worry about memorizing it. Everyone is going to get them confused for months or years, and that's fine. So
Just how it goes.
yeah, -IT, these are options which say interactive and TTY, I think. And what that means is I want to run something in this container, but hook it up right now to my shell that I'm already in here. So I'm going to take a new program, run it in Docker. That program is another shell. It's another like actual shell that you, just like your terminal shell that you already have. And it's going to connect it right up to this shell so that you're now inside the container. So we're going to say, after that is the name of the container. So here I have an ID. You could copy this container ID. It's going to be different for everybody. But I believe you can also use the name of the container. So I'm just going to say Postgres. And then the last thing is what program you want to run interactively in your container. And that's going to be the shell. So the same, again, the same as what the terminal is running right now, which is a shell. It's an interactive type, see the response, type, see the response. This is a program itself. We're going to go into the container and run the same kind of program, but inside the container. So we'll do /bin/bash. And you can see now my prompt here has changed. I was in this like /this thing. My Mac is configured to print out the folder like this when I'm in the terminal, I think. But now that we're running a brand new shell inside our container, this has changed. It says root at the name, the ID of the container. Okay.
I got
Did anyone else get something different?
Oh, it didn't work with the number either.
Okay, so your container ID is actually this. So
This
the one-
number?
Yep. So you can use that, or you can use the word Postgres.
Yeah, I tried that first.
Did you name it Post? Oh, you probably copied it and it was PG. I think it's PG in the. So you can either try pasting that container ID.
This number?
Yep. Or you could try PG instead of Postgres. I think they both work.
Capital or doesn't matter.
I think all just PG lowercase.
Okay.
And we'll get it set up so that this matches. Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Well, we can restart the container with the new name if you'd like it to match, I guess, everybody else's or the video. I got to make the slides match what we're doing now.
I just forgot that for some reason.
Oh, okay.
Not every place else.
Right, but now the name is Postgres with 2 S's.
Yeah.
Great. Anybody else have trouble getting that shell? Good.
This is really cool. What do you do with this?
Well, we're gonna do that right now. Oh, you're already in the next step.
Yeah.
Shell. Very good. Very good. Okay. Nina, good.
I'm in the wrong folder, but I'll get caught up.
Okay. It shouldn't actually matter at all.
Oh,
which
it
folder
wasn't
you're
that
in.
a minute? Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
Docker
then.
is just its own land.
Okay, then, so I didn't have to be inside of a particular folder when I did the Postgres.
No.
Okay, well, then I'm fine.
Okay. Yeah, and you can always. Okay. So everybody except for Kelly, who's ahead, is in the container at a shell. Now this has all the same commands as the other shell, or most of them. Like if I do ls, it lists stuff in the file. If I do cd dot dot, well, I'm not gonna do that. But if I do cd dot, it'll change to the same folder. You have the same kind of command: cd, pwd, ls. It's a shell. It's another kind of shell. Inside this shell, we're going to run a command called psql. And this program is a Postgres client. So this thing knows how to talk to the Postgres server. It can speak the Postgres protocol. It handles all of that for you. So all you need to do is tell it which commands to execute in the database with a new language. But there's no protocol to worry about. This thing will connect for you. This thing handles it. It's built into every Postgres installation. Now later on, we'll actually set up a program which is much nicer, and you don't have to do all of this Docker stuff, and it will save your configuration and everything. So, well, you'll have to do one Docker command and a program in the future, and then your web server will just have, it's just npm install a certain thing, and that thing knows how to talk to Postgres, and it's just JavaScript. But not yet. We're gonna have some fun first. So psql -U. And the user is Postgres, I think. Because that's just the default and we didn't override it. And then you can, there's like setting the host, setting the port. You can have it connect to any Postgres server that it can see on the internet or on your local network. The default host is localhost. The default port is 5432. So we're already inside this container. We already have access to that inner port. We could run this from outside the container if we had PSQL, but we don't. So it's going to by default connect to localhost 5432. That's where our server is. We should be all set. So as long as you pass it the user, you should get a new prompt. Now this is like Inception. We're like 3 levels in. We have shell in Visual, VS Code shell, normal shell, then our container shell. We started running that. And then from our container shell, we started running PSQL, which is not a shell like CD, and you can't do ls or anything. And you need semicolons here. And it doesn't like ls or any of this. It's a totally different, we're in a totally different world here. So we are now talking directly to our Postgres database. And we're going to basically send it SQL commands. And we don't have a whole lot of time to do that today, but I will show you a couple. If we were gonna save this data that our program is saving, we would make a table. At the very least, we would make a table called messages, because we need a whole lot of messages. And the way you put that in a database like this is with a table. So we would do create table messages. The convention is all the commands are uppercase and like the names of tables and stuff are lowercase, but people are sloppy with this and it doesn't really care. So I'm just doing it because I want to, but You probably don't need any upper cases if you don't want to bother. So we're going to create this table. We're going to pass it our 3 column types. We have name, we have message, and we have timestamp, right? So we're going to say name, space, and then the type of name is what's called varchar. That just means string. That's like a fancy kind of way to say string.
Yeah.
This
is there
here,
any curly
yes.
brace?
So this is a parenthesis.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Okay. So actually, you can hit enter whenever you want, as long as you don't type a semicolon, and it'll give you the next line. So name varchar, that's a string. Oh, and it
No
tells me,
quotes for it?
not yet.
Okay.
The second column is message, varchar. It's another string. And then the third column is the timestamp. So this will be received at, we'll call it received at. And the convention is to put an underscore and make it lowercase with database columns. This is going to be a timestamp. And you can give it with time zone if you want, or without time zone. I'm going to say with time zone. There's really no good reason to, well, there are good reasons. Time zones and time, working with time and computers is awful. You're just going to have to learn that at some point, that like, it's one of the worst things to do is to say, I want to work on this program that somebody in Arizona uses. Well, guess what they don't have in Arizona? They don't have daylight savings time. So twice a year, the clock in Arizona shifts relative to the rest of the country. And that's just America. And in Arizona, there's an Indian reservation where they do have daylight savings time and another one where they don't. So just, you know, if you have to sell a product across the country to different countries or to the Indian reservations, you're going to have a bad time because you're going to have to deal with all that. So
Life will be a living hell.
yeah, maybe, yeah. Maybe have a local business, you know. Anyway, all right, so this says with the time zone, and I closed the parentheses, but it still doesn't know that the statement's over until I put a semicolon. So I'm going to add a semicolon. And then it prints back create table. So that didn't really make any data, but now we have described the shape of one of our messages. So we've given it all of the types and the field names that we're going to save with every single message. So the next thing we can do is select. The star is going to say select every column. This is generally considered a bad practice if you're writing it by hand in a program, in an actual server, because it can be very inefficient. But when you're doing it on your own, and you probably don't want to be writing this for any of your web servers at all, or anytime soon, you're not going to want to do the star. You're not going to want to write this stuff at all when you're doing your real projects. So, you know, but that's a thing. The star is risky, but it's way quicker. So select star from messages. That's it. Semicolon ends the statement. And what I get back is name message received at, and then 0 rows. So this is telling me there's nothing in here. We know that there's a table called messages, and it has these columns that you defined, but there's nothing in there. Is everyone getting that back? Cool. Okay, so final thing, and then we're done. Insert into messages. We give it the 3 columns we're inserting. You can leave some out if you want, but you have to give it the same order of the columns, naming the columns, and then the data over here. You can actually skip this part, but let's not skip it. So name, message, received at. These are the 3 columns we're going to write. Close the parentheses. And then after this, what are we going to insert? We need to give it some values. So we use the word values here. It is now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like,
It's sort of like English, but it gets, we'll have some fun with this pretty soon. Values. Gus, hello from the Genius Center in Syracuse, New York.
so mine is giving me message does not exist.
Did you do messages or message?
I just did message. And right here, message.
Yeah, but we did create table messages. So that's a little confusing. The column has almost the same name as the table. That's probably sort of a bad sign. And this generally, we're not going to use anything looking like this when we do real data. I'm just saying this is how the chat data would be mapped to a table. So messages, yeah. Okay, so the values are Gus, hello from the Genius Center in Syracuse, New York, and received at, which is whatever you want it to be, but like it's not actually, I'm going to do now. So this is a special function which will just do the same kind of thing as a new date when you were adding the current timestamp. This is in SQL land. If you run just now, either lowercase or capitals with parentheses after, that's going to give you the current time. So I close this second set of parentheses for the values, put a semicolon there, and it spits back insert 01, which means it did something and it didn't break. So last thing we do is select star from messages again.
Cool.
And there it is. So this is a little bit, doesn't format that great, but you can see it saved one row.
The same command we did before that shows the table. Select star. You can just press the up arrow twice.
Oh, you can do up arrow in this. Very cool.
Yeah, I tried it. It works.
Okay, so I'm going to do one more thing real quick. You don't have to follow along with this, but if I do insert into, and I'm going to delete this. Wait. Okay, I'm going to do insert into messages. I'm going to skip the first part because I already know what the columns are and I'm feeling risky. So I'm going to say Eva, hello from Eva, sorry. Good. And now, right? So I'm going to insert something with the name Eva. Eva's right? Okay. And it's like, okay, that's a fair, that's the right shape. You know, I didn't have to list the columns. It's a good practice too. But now we say select star, and I'm getting lazy here, so no capitalization, from messages. So we have two. We have Gus, hello from the Genius Center, Eva, hello from Eva. I can do now select star from messages where, this doesn't have to be capitalized, name equals Eva. And that's only going to give me the one. And I can do the same for Gus, and that's sort of the basics of how you start working with data. It gets way, way, way beyond this, and it supports a whole lot more data than this, a whole lot more, or else it wouldn't even be close to the trouble we just went through. But that is the basics of how it works. So that's all for today. The homework is in the at the end. So there's a couple slides in the middle we're going to go over tomorrow, and then we're going to get into data modeling. wonder if we should get right into data modeling and then come back to the more lecture stuff on Thursday. And or if people want to go to Open Hack tomorrow and do that, like do data modeling, or do you want to come here? What are you thinking? Okay, so I'm hoping we're gonna do, what if we did 5:30 to 6 here? And did just intro to data modeling, and then let's go, because that whole thing is going to be we're gonna be doing that activity, and that whole evening we can do it on pencil and paper, and we're gonna, or if you want, there's drawing tools in the website if you want to have like a drawing tool, but I usually do this kind of thing on pencil and paper. We're going to talk about how you start modeling data, because there's tables here, and there can be more than one table. There can be people and messages and login information and all kinds of other things, and then you link them together. And that's how you want to start building the backbone of where your projects are going to store any of their data. So, I mean, how many people have a project which is a server and a login? Is everyone doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I think pretty much everybody is going to want to have a nice place to store this. Now, you're not going to want to go right off and start writing select star from this, that, and this in JavaScript, because that's not normally how you do this. But you can start modeling the data. We can start actually talking about the shape of that data, the columns that you're going to use, and how the things are interlinked. And we'll do that tomorrow. So that's tomorrow. There is an article about the diagrams we're going to be doing tomorrow. I definitely recommend reading this. The extra credit, if you want to jump in and get your feet wet with some SQL, there's a web page which has some little exercises. You don't have to do this in Docker, but that's the homework. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gus.
All right. So on YouTube.